Welcome, everybody. Welcome back from lunch. I hope your bellies are happy and you're ready for the next half, the final half of the day's session. First, I'm wearing somebody's jacket, and I don't know whose it is, but if you want it, it's a really nice Patagonia raincoat. And is it yours? No, for real. Like I'm hoping to get it back to its rightful owner. But so if you're missing a Patagonia rain jacket that looks like this, come find me and I will give it to you. So I'm happy to introduce our next panel. We're going to be hearing perspectives from the public sector. And at the far end of this row, okay, I can find real words, I promise. Okay, to your far left is Dr. Richard Levey. He's a land use and development executive. He has served the city of Orlando as city planning bureau chief and as the city's chief administrative officer. Dr. Levey earned his PhD in public affairs and policy research from the University of Central Florida, and he has an MA in geography and spatial analysis of land use from Arizona State University, and a BA in geography and urban studies from Wittenberg University. And he's known as Mikey because Mikey will like it. Mikey will try it. Maybe Mikey will try it. That Life cereal commercial. Do any of you remember that? Yeah, he's always willing to try anything. So give it to Dr. Levey if you need him to try something new and be on the bleeding edge. Okay. And not next, but 2 doors down from me, Mike Register is the executive director of the St. Johns River Water Management District. He has worked in the district's regulatory, engineering, ground and surface water modeling, water supply planning, and minimum flow and levels programs. So easy work every single day. He earned a master's of engineering and a bachelor of science in agricultural engineering from the University of Florida. And to my right here, to your far right, is Todd Swingle. He is the executive director, CEO of Toho Water Authority. He is a board member for the National Association of Clean Water Agencies, the Association of Metropolitan Water Agencies, and the Water Research Foundation. Also lots of easy jobs, easy hats. Todd holds bachelor's and master's degrees in environmental engineering from the University of Central Florida, an MBA from the University of Florida, and is also a licensed professional engineer in the state of Florida. Many hats as well. And finally, last but not least, we have Miss Amy Lockhart is the Seminole County District 4 Commissioner, Board of Trustees Chairman. Her work with the local government and solid working relationships with many different community groups equip her with a unique perspective in her various roles and responsibilities. As a commissioner, volunteer, and liaison to multiple organizations and committees, Amy has worked to protect our precious environmental resources and ability to enjoy the great outdoors at the same time. Thank you for all that you all do, and looking forward to hearing the panel. And you've got the mic. Yep.
Good afternoon. I think you can understand from the short bio that Janice gave me why I've been asked to facilitate the public sector panel. That was the first half of my career, but since 2007, I've been affiliated with the Sunbridge Tavistock Development Company in Sunbridge, and I like to think that I had something to do with all the research, the living laboratory that's going on at Sunbridge. And you know, this movement, the outside Collab, this movement is really a in my view, a bottom-up movement. We're doing all of this research and examining all of these theories of alternative landscapes and building towards change in the way in which we manage the land and we consume water. And so clearly this effort at the ground level is just critical because you have to have the data in order to make change. And where does change happen? It happens at the policy level. It happens at the public policy level. And today we have a panel of 3 public policy experts. 2 are appointed. Mike and Todd are appointed and lead large organizations in in water management and utilities, and Amy sitting as an elected official at the local government level, which is really where a lot of the action is. And so today's perspective is to hear from these folks that are involved in policy and their view of what is going on here, and have an opportunity to ask them some questions. But at the end of the day, change is going to happen in this hierarchical governmental policy-making structure, and it wouldn't happen if we weren't doing all of that critical day-to-day research to justify policy change. So Mike, I'm going to turn it over to you. We'll go through the panel, let them make their comments, and we'll open it up to questions. I may have some follow-up for them as well.
Thank you. It's Mike Register. I'm the Executive Director for the St. Johns River Water Management District. I've been with the district 33 years. Started there right out of college, and noticed that two of my professors were on previous panels here from the University of Florida, Dr. Pierce Jones and Dr. Dale Botcher. So if you don't like how I perform or how things go, blame my education and my professors on that. I'm doing the best that I can with the training that I've had. Start off with our mission: protect natural resources and support Florida's growth by ensuring sustainable use of Florida's water for the benefit of the people of the district and the state. And so not only are we charged with protecting those resources, we are also charged with making sure that we have an adequate water supply for both the growing needs of our state and those resources. And that becomes kind of a balancing act for us to do, and requires a lot of partnership and a lot of collaboration and cooperation. And that's why I'm honored to be here today as a part of this type of event. Our core missions, you see, they're all pretty water related: water supply, water quality, flood protection, and natural systems. I'm going to try to go a little faster. Todd said he wanted me to go as long as I could to see if we had no time for questions, but I'm going to try to blow through these fast enough so at least Todd can answer a couple questions here. I know a lot of people, when they come to Florida, especially if they come from more arid type regions and things like that, and you can't look anywhere without seeing a puddle of water or a lake or something somewhere, they wonder, how can we have a water supply problem? And you know, the data there, you know, kind of shows it. 54 inches of rainfall, over 7,000 lakes, 50,000 miles of rivers, 700 springs, the largest concentration of springs anywhere in the world. But the answer is pretty simple. It's that all of our ecology, all of the natural systems that are out there grew up with this amount of rainfall. And so they developed with that. So they require a lot of that water in order for them to be protected. So that just leaves the little bit difference that we have to work with for our own personal use. And one of the missions that I mentioned was water supply planning. And within this area, the Central Florida Water Initiative is where we're located at. And that's a planning area that spans not only my district, St. Johns Water Management District, but Southwest Water Management District and South Florida Water Management District. So we all got together, and it was actually the first plan, joint plan by multiple districts. And that's because the districts were actually set up on surface water boundaries. But the groundwater doesn't really pay any attention to any of that. So you pump out on one side, you know, of the boundary, and it'll affect resources on the other. So it was necessary for us to come together, do the planning necessary to determine, you know, what are the limits that we have out there in our natural systems. And it kind of reached the conclusion that beyond about 760 million gallons a day of withdrawals from our upper Floridan, that was kind of the limit where we started to see impacts to our natural resources, and we're predicted to reach that probably next year or the year after, I think. And so DEP actually adopted some new rules for CFWI that required things like additional conservation measures, lower per capitas, things that kind of shape and maybe take, we'll be able to kind of push some of the things that we've talked about in some of the presentations here today. One of the constraints that we look at in that is minimum flows and levels. And this just shows two of the outstanding Florida springs that are located in that Central Florida Water Initiative area, Wekiwa Springs and Rock Springs. And so determining, you know, what level of flow those have to support the natural systems around them, and then determining where that limit of withdrawals for consumptive use, for public supply use, for agricultural use, where that limit is, that when you reach that, you'll have significant harm occur to these systems. We're actually in the process right now of reevaluating these, and we'll probably come out with a new minimum flow and level next year. And because of the withdrawals that have occurred so far, it'll probably require some type of recovery or prevention strategy to make sure that those systems are adequately protected. As I mentioned, water supply planning, one of the main things, and CFWI is one of our planning regions. We're required to do it wherever, when we go out there and do an analysis, shows that looking 20 years out, that the current sources that are being utilized are not sufficient to supply the needed water use for that 20-year period, whatever those demands are. We have to do water supply planning in that area, and we have to come up with solutions that will provide that water, not only for the environment, but for public supply use and all other consumptive uses. And our entire district, all of it, is now covered by a water supply plan because we have reached kind of the limit of that ability to withdraw. Now, that's not saying that we're out of water by any means. I mean, you can look outside and see that. But we have reached the limit of the incredibly, almost embarrassingly cheap water that we have with very little treatment, where you can just stick a straw in the ground somewhere and drink the water. And so we are reaching the limits of what we can withdraw from those sources, which why conservation and proper planting and reduction of water use is an important component. And conservation simply matters. I mean, it is one of the key components to all of our water supply plans, because without that, we have to develop very sometimes expensive water resource development or alternative water supply projects. We're still going to need those, but to minimize those and put those farther out into the future, if we can do things that can reduce the demand, not only of our existing users, but of our future users, if we can do that, we can put off those projects and make us have to spend less. We have a project right now in North Florida where we're spending $100 million to move water from where we have too much water to where we don't have enough water, and clean it up and get it in the ground. And so we can delay projects like that. We can make the need for using those kind of expensive things less by implementing simple conservation measures. And if you look at where our water use is, this is showing about half of it is being used for irrigation systems, wherever they have installed irrigation systems. So if you think about that, half of the water use, you could double out, if you got rid of that. I'm not saying we're getting rid of that or any of that kind of stuff, but if you got rid of that, you would double your water supply for those systems. So where can we reduce it? That is the area. I think one of the speakers and one of the other ones mentioned that, you do some of the good habits and the showering and the clothes washing and all that, and you reduce it a little bit, but that's overwhelmed if you have an outdoor irrigation system and you're utilizing a lot of water for high volume irrigation demands. And so where can we attack it the most? It's through that. This, I think, slide was already shown. It just shows the increase in irrigation with the increase in the percentage of systems that have installed irrigation system. And the answer to that is, if they have it, they're going to use it. And so making that design and making the landscape such that it doesn't need that, is the way that you can reduce the amount of water that's affected by that. And one of the things we want to remember is, trying to use the lowest quality water source. That's a requirement of our consumptive use program, that whatever the use is, you're showing that you can use the lowest quality water source. And so reclaimed water, storm water, rainwater harvesting is going to become more and more important. Especially as we're developing new rules for our other regulatory program, the Environmental Resource Permitting Program, that has more stringent requirements about stormwater discharge. And so we're really looking at making sure that we've reduced the amount of nutrients that are being discharged to our water bodies, especially where we have impaired water bodies. And so what is that going to do? That's going to make it more important and have another opportunity for us to recycle some of this stormwater and use that and make it more affordable, because you're going to have to do that anyway in order to meet some of the nutrient requirements in a lot of areas. And so that's another way that we can use an alternative source of water to reduce our water use from our Floridan aquifer. And of course, the driver behind all of that and lowering it, and what a lot of everything's been talking about today is that sustainable landscaping. And so you can even carry that sustainable on into a sustainable amount of water that you can have available to use it. We need to live in balance with nature so that, we're only using that amount that we can without causing adverse impacts to our natural environment. And so if the drivers aren't there, if the need isn't there, and if that's driven by, what's planted and how that landscape looks, that can go a long way to reducing our demands for future water use. And just go over a few more things and try to wrap it up a little bit. With the district, we do have watering restrictions. This is that balance of regulation and incentives. I think you have to have both. And so we have year-long watering restrictions. They're fixing to go to 1 day a week whenever we go away from daylight savings time and fall back because the water use is not needed as much during those times. And we also have incentive programs, cost share programs, to where we partner with agricultural operators, utilities, cities, in order to implement measures that can reduce their water usage. So it's a combination of regulatory and incentives. And with that, just the future has to include collaborative approaches for us to overcome the challenges that we have to meet those. And that wraps it up for me.
Good afternoon. My name's Todd Swingle. I'm the CEO and Executive Director, and I think I missed Mike's memo, so I'm not sure I have quite enough slides to keep us getting past the questions, but I'll give it a shot. So just a couple things that I want to highlight is, first of all, I want to recognize our team today here. We have Jackie Torbert and Rodney Tilley, but also Mary Rose, now Rodriguez, are part of our team that focuses on conservation, and they really are the drivers behind a lot of this. But I also want to highlight that, I hope to bring a unique perspective to utilities, because I've had a real good opportunity to work both in the consulting arena, the public sector, but also in the private sector globally. I spent time in India where we had a plant with 5,000 people that got water every other day, and another plant that if the monsoons were late, we shut down for 2 weeks. And so those are some unique perspectives that often we don't have here in the US because utilities have done such a good job of being reliable. But I think it's those kinds of stories that let us know that we can operate differently. So a couple things I'd just like to tell you about Toho. We are an independent special district formed by an act of the legislature. We were born out of the City of Kissimmee Utility Department, but now we serve 4-member governments, which is Osceola County, the City of St. Cloud, the City of Kissimmee, and Polk County. We have 17 water and 9 water reclamation facilities, almost 4,000 miles of pipeline that we own and maintain. And our growth has been through system expansion, acquisition, and insourcing of some of our supporting functions. So we provide water reclamation, and reuse services. So I want to highlight alternative water supply and conservation strategies. So one of the things Mike talked about was the Central Florida Water Initiative and that looming deadline, the 2025, where that is the time period where utilities are needing to move to alternative water supplies. I'm very proud of our organization in that we've started this many, many years ago. Some of our first large-scale projects began planning and permitting back in the 2008-2009 timeframe, and even going back beyond that with our deployment of reclaim systems. I don't have a NPDES permit. We have one site that has a wet weather discharge, and that permit's going away. So everything that we have is used for either public access irrigation or groundwater recharge. And so we're very proud of that because we're putting reuse to good use and making sure that it is treated like a resource. We're moving rapidly toward alternative supplies. Some of those include our Cypress Lake project, which is an inland desalination project that'll be constructed here somewhere over the next 5 to 8 years. We're working collaboratively with St. John's on a Taylor Creek Reservoir project that is a surface water project. But also you can see in this corner up here is a project that we worked with Osceola County to create what is called the Toho Reservoir, It's a 400 million gallon reservoir that captures discharges from Mill Slough and the city ditch. It's a very positive project in that it's capturing these discharge sources that are carrying nutrients. It serves as the stormwater treatment mechanism for an economic development project, which is NeoCity. And it's now serving as, it will be serving as a supplemental source for irrigation, but that can also be converted to potable needs if necessary. So we have blended all of those needs of working with the community, economic development, nutrient management, and water supply. And I believe that that is truly the story of the future of where we need to be. Aquifer recharge. Again, the driver for CFWI has been impacts on wetlands, springs, and we've got to make sure that where we're working with recharge of the Florida aquifer is important. We already have that requirement as part of our water use permits, but we have an obligation to even more creatively look at how we supply water. So in this case, we have been able to secure additional groundwater by ensuring that we're adding enough extra water through recharge so that it's an offset credit to make sure that we are not impacting those wetlands and springs. So and that works out very well for us from a planning standpoint because we're able to use those natural systems for storage because it's not day-to-day operations that causes this challenge. It's month to month or year to year. And so this type of using those natural systems is very helpful. Partnerships and customer education, at the end of the day, that is absolutely critical. We've seen very good data that shows that working with people to create that education changes their behavior. The challenge is we serve over 150,000 connections, so getting to all of them is really hard. So it's something that we need to do. We're very active on, but it's just one part of the solution. And the last is our Toho efficiency program that I'd like to highlight. It's focused on all new development that establishes the requirements for what they need to do in terms of indoor and outdoor efficiency. As part of that requirement today in a new residential development, we limit supplemental irrigation to be designed to 28 inches per year. We're looking at driving that and working toward driving that down to 24. And through partnerships with Tavistock and Sunbridge, we're already seeing opportunities where with Florida native landscaping that we're seeing results that could drive that down into the mid-teens as far as supplemental irrigation. That, again, of getting ahead of development is one of our key areas. And you can see that that is our focus. Our focus is on development. We absolutely want to work with our existing customers. That's very important. But every one of you has seen the growth that's happening in Central Florida. For St. Cloud, Kissimmee, Osceola County, that equates to almost 7,000 new homes a year. Getting in front of those to make sure that they are equipped to be successful is our highest priority. Making sure that they are prepared to be successful is absolutely our highest priority, and that's where we'll be successful. And you see things here from choices of your landscape, minimizing turf, soil amendments. All of these are options to help improve our the use and the efficiency of how we use water. I do want to highlight the other piece that I think is absolutely critical is just making this cool, right? Because how many people think they need turf or yards or all of this, all of the grass? But from a practical standpoint, changing that perspective where this is what people want is really key. So back to Mike's comment about the combination of regulation and incentives, there is elements of regulation, but there's also that piece of demonstrating how this adds so much value and how it can look awesome. Owner engagement, making sure that we are working with customers that that piece of rates. A rate signal is important. People notice when their bill goes up and that if they're using too much water, and that does create a signal. That's very important. That is one of the best signals that we have to communicate with our customers so that we can drive that conservation. I am proud of our board as well. They've been supportive of establishing sustainable rates. And just this year, our reclaimed water rates are tied to our potable rates. They have right now they are at 65%. Reclaim is 65% of potable. Our board just adopted a plan to close that gap by 5% per year. Because water's water. Doesn't matter from an irrigation standpoint whether it's reclaimed water or potable water other than we want to use that reclaimed water because we are using that lowest source. And so we're trying to drive that. So we're closing that gap on rates. Providing customer support, helping with irrigation timer changes, customer education, a degree of schedule monitoring so that we can see when people are not being compliant and offer that education and support so that we can help them, because most people want to do the right thing. They absolutely do. And when they're given that opportunity and you make it easy, they want to do the right thing. And then finally, I just want to highlight a piece, and this was just completed in the last 2 weeks at our building. And it was a partnership with the City of Kissimmee, Osceola Arts, and is a mural featuring Florida native vegetation, pollinators, and it is, again, an idea of our team. And it's really critical because part of our promise is that our customers, our community, our employees trust that Toho cares. And it's more than just water. It's connecting with education, science, and building that connectivity. This is the beginning of what is a larger plan for installing a Florida-friendly, Florida-native garden in front of our building to use as both a way to beautify our community, but also create that connectedness so that people can see what these things look like and that we can do education on irrigation timers and other things. And with that, I'll turn it over.
So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amy Lockhart. I get to serve this year as the chairman of the Seminole County Commission. And if the goal today is to have the fewest number of slides, it's going to be me because I have one. And actually, I may not even use it because so much of the quality information that's been shared this morning, it may just be superfluous. But I want to talk to you a little bit about my role. And it's not just me, but it would be the hundreds, if not thousands, of elected officials who serve in the state of Florida. Local government is an oddball game. How many of you are involved in some way, shape, or form in local government? You're an employee, you're awesome. How many of you are elected? How many policymakers in the room? 1, 2? Okay, God bless you. Sometimes being elected is it's a blessing and a curse at times. So as a fellow policymaker, let me say that the things I'm about to say, I don't mean to be directed at you, but as you know, the group as a whole. So I'm going to share a couple of secrets about who we are. We are not experts. We are butchers and bakers and candlestick makers. We are your neighbors, and we had something that we were passionate about that made us want to run for office. And every single one of us had a different type of passion. I can tell you mine was not sustainability and landscaping. I was a school board member for 6 years. My passion was education. And what I brought with me to the county commission was acknowledging all the things I didn't know. Because I think it's critical when we serve in these roles that we don't come in thinking that we're the experts. We need to look to all of the folks who raised their hands who said that they worked for local government as the experts. We hire county managers, we hire county attorneys, city managers, city attorneys. We hire great people to run utilities. But you know, I serve with a guy who's love him. He owns a car repair shop. Brilliant man. I would love to take my car to him to have it fixed. I'm not going to count on him to figure out how to make sure our water supply is what it needs to be, right? And that's not a diss at him. That's who we are. So when I started getting emails from Thousand Friends of Florida, because they send emails to every elected official, I think, in the state of Florida. Where's Paul? Paul, right? Love you, mean it. I delete most of the emails before I read them. But I decided to read one last year that was about this thing called the Outside Collaborative. I was like, this is pretty cool. I need to go learn about this. This looks like it could be something pretty interesting and some things that I need to learn about. Because let me tell you what happens when you sit as an elected official. People come to you with their passion. So whether it is a builder, a developer, it's their passion. You've got to build homes. You heard earlier today, we've got 1,000 people a day moving to Florida. And oftentimes those builders and developers are villainized, right? You guys are evil developers. Oh, you're just doing it for the money. Well, actually, I think they're doing it to build houses so all of those people can live. Everybody hates the developer except for the one that built their house, right? Like, I live in a fantastic house, but everybody's supposed to hate the builder who built it. So you've got the builders coming to you and talking about their needs and the things that they have to do in order to fulfill their mission. Then you have Native Plant Society folks. How many folks are here from Native Plant Society? Like, you're passionate about native plants. My kids are a fifth generation of my family to live in Florida. I'm passionate about native plants, not as passionate as some of you are. But I have native plants, but I can tell you that when you have the builder come in to talk to you, and then you have the folks who are passionate about native plants, and you have to somehow figure out how to develop an ordinance that accommodates every stakeholder in that conversation, it is virtually impossible. Because the reality of all native mandate versus what a builder can build and what you can actually accomplish reasonably, when it comes before a board of elected 5 people, you have to figure out where you're going to land. Are you going to land philosophically with the folks who you may really agree with that native plants and sustainability are where we need to be aspirationally, even if we're not there yet? Or do you look like you're in the pocket of the developer? I can't tell you how many times I've gotten an email that says, you're just in the pocket of the developer. Well, I mean, no. Have you looked at my Form 6? That's the financial statement that we have to fill out every year as elected officials. It's the financial version of a colonoscopy. It's quite invasive. So seriously, look them up. They're public record. They're in Tallahassee. Anyway, I think what happens to us in that place when we have to have these tough conversations, and they are tough conversations, is you want so much to do the right thing that for what everyone wants. And the reality is you can't ever vote to do something that makes everyone happy. So you start to look at, well, what are our solutions? So you start to try to learn, and you try to marinate in some of these topics so that you can make the best decision you can with the information you have, with where you are reasonably. And so we started talking as a group about this concept of native plant availability. If we were to vote to change our land development code to require 80% native plants in a development, let me tell you how that thought process goes. Is it 80% of the plants? Is it 80% of the lot? Is it, right? Is it 80%? What is the 80% of first? And then what if you can't source that? What if we've just created a development order or a land development code that makes it virtually impossible for developers to develop? I can tell you, I have several constituents who would say, yes, that's ultimately their goal. Their goal is that they want to stop development, and that's not reasonable or rational either. But they'll tell you, that's fantastic. If you create an ordinance that means that these developers can't develop here, that's what I want. That's a constituency. It's true. So you have to go through, I want you to put yourself in the place of the elected official for a minute and think through all of the unintended consequences that can happen when someone comes with what their, whatever their desire is. How many of you lived in Florida when the legislature was talking about mandating high performance septic systems? It was like 2006-ish. Okay. I don't know if you remember. But the septic system that the legislature was considering requiring was only made by one company. They might have had a pretty good lobbyist. I don't know. But the reality is, as a policymaker, I can't create a policy, an ordinance, a land development code that can't be sourced without competition. Right? I mean, that's just not. Well, I mean, actually, some of you who may be in the private sector are like, why not? Sounds good to me. Someone will catch up eventually. But those are the kinds of things that we have to think about as policymakers. So it's funny, one of the things that I'm a trustee at Seminole State College, and so I kind of still get to keep my my foot in the education world, and I love it. I really do. I miss the school district. There's just something about walking into a classroom full of kindergartners and they want to come up and tell you about what they just learned. I can tell you most of the folks that come into my office are not like eager beaver kindergartners. They're usually mad about something. And it, at the core, I do believe whether you're on the left of the political spectrum or on the right of the political spectrum, everyone wants to do what they think is the right thing. We're all sitting in this room together because we have the ultimate goal of wanting to make good choices, set good policy for long-term sustainability for our future, for our children, and for this state. We may have different ideas about how to get there, but I think we really have to be careful sometimes in our conversations when we're talking with elected officials in particular about pigeonholing one another, because we start to see one another as the political ideology that we associate with and less about the people and the ultimate goal of what it is that we're trying to do as a community. And I remember I said one time, I know as a Republican, we're supposed to hate clean water and fresh air, right? Like I'm not supposed to like those kinds of things as a Republican, and somehow Democrats got the corner on the market on clean water and fresh air. I don't know how we allowed that to happen, but because when you look at this past legislative session, I mean, I got to give it up to the Republican legislators. There's some things I'm not real happy about that they've done in terms of going over local government control and what have you. But they've done an amazing job of dedicating resources to sustainable practices and the Florida Wildlife Corridor and making sure that we have resources to be able to try to fix some of the things that we've talked about that have gone wrong. And so I will give them props for a lot of that work that's happened. So let me show you real quickly this one slide that probably completely irrelevant at this point. So this is a corner of Seminole County. And this was actually showed, the first time I saw it, I think it was Pierce Jones showed me this on a Zoom meeting that we had together. And thank you, by the way, to all of the University of Florida IFAS folks. If you're an IFAS person, you are my hero. You are unbelievable, right? Unbelievable subject matter experts in everything from growing a kitchen garden to canning to to water initiative, like you name it, like they are my go-to for everything. I love my extension office. So when I was having this conversation with Dr. Jones and trying to figure out where are we in Seminole County, like, are we really, really bad? Because if I'm listening to the people who are coming to my office, like we are about to burn in hell bad, like in terms of sustainability and environmentalism. And he said, well, let me show you. I've got this map. And so he pulled this up, and you can kind of see red is bad, by the way. I learned that. The amount of water that is being used in some of our communities in Seminole County, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of gallons of water just being potable water being thrown out on yards. And in Seminole, unlike in other of our neighboring counties, most of our county has been developed. We don't have a lot of this wonderful new ground to be able to implement some of these practices that are being talked about today, like if we had it to do over again kind of practices, right? Someone mentioned that earlier today, like, well, how do you retrofit? Most of Seminole County at this stage of the game, we're talking about retrofitting because the eastern third of our county is protected by what we call the rural boundary. So really, we are an incredibly dense county. We are mostly developed in that area, and we would have to go back and retrofit a lot of these neighborhoods. And the education, because that's kind of where I'm coming from, I feel like educating people is the first step before you start changing ordinances because they don't understand why. So then they're just non-compliant. And then we don't have a way to enforce it. And then you're putting code violations on someone's house, and now they've got a lien. And it snowballs, and you've got, grandmas in front of you at the county commission meeting crying because she can't pay her lien, and she's, oh, well, no one told me. And we did it with good intention, because we listened to the people that came in and said, you need to do this, and so we did it, and now grandma's crying, and she's got a lien on her house, right? And that's not what we want. We want to educate, we want people to understand why At some point, you will have people who are just, throwing their middle finger up at you. And when you got to throw on a code violation, you do that. It gets to that point. I get it. There are people who are just going to be non-compliant intentionally. But those are so few and far between. The majority of people want to do the right thing, but they don't know what it is. Met some folks earlier today who just moved here from New York, wherever, from the last however many years. And they said, oh my gosh, we didn't know all of it's so different. Florida is so different. Well, I grew up in Broward County. Seminole County is way different than Broward County in terms of plant material. And I moved to Seminole, and my mom bought me a wool coat because we were moving up north. And right, it's just really, really different. So wherever you've moved from, chances are pretty good Florida is a different animal than wherever you came from. And so I would say that the opportunity to educate not just our own people who have lived here for forever, but the thousands of new people that are moving here is ripe. And partnerships with folks like IFAS, partnerships, when you go to Lowe's, right? So someone said, if no one will mark, you can't buy, if it's below a 5, you're not going to be able to sell it, right? It's not marketable. The death rack at Lowe's. I'm that girl. I go to the back of the Lowe's Garden Center. I find the ones that look like they're on their last leg because I can bring them back. I know I can. But you've got to know that there are opportunities, even through private sector folks, whether it's big box stores. People can only buy and plant what they have the availability. So when I'm running through Lowe's with my cart, if all I have are plants to choose from that are non-native species, that's all I know, right? So education's huge. So I would then I would say the fact that there's only one other elected official in this room is a huge challenge to each and every one of you who works for local government. Build relationships with your elected officials. Do not be afraid of them. I know sometimes they act like they might bite. Some of them might. Most of them will not bite. But you have an incredible amount of knowledge and the ability to persuade that you may not know you have with these elected officials. Take the time to build the relationship, to educate them, and invite them to come to this conference next year. Because their eyes will be opened to the many different facets and stakeholders involved in this process. And I think that that's really the only way that we're going to be able to truly start to make strides, is to have every person that has a piece of this puzzle at the table.
Aren't you guys glad she went last? Madam Chair, that was wonderful. You mentioned that you were not passionate about alternative landscapes last year, but I think something's happened to you over time. So we're so glad that you're part of this movement. We're going to take some questions from the audience. I just wanted to make a couple of comments. Mike, you talked about the Central Florida Water Initiative, and some might ask, why would a master plan developer sort of get into this and sort of shake it up and do something completely out of the box and drive a 30,000 acre investment and sort of get on this path? And when we were developing all of the early plans for Sunbridge, we knew that water supply is going to be a huge issue in the future, and this project has got 30, 40-year life, and so we just wanted to get ahead of the curve. And I'm only 26 years old, but those of you in the room that have been in Florida and been involved in local government and growth management, you'll remember the concurrency, the early growth management acts in the 80s, and the rules and concurrency, and that was going to be the savior to manage growth in Florida, and the legislature figured a way to sort of get around those rules. And you may have heard me say this before, but transportation used to be the single most constraining factor. If you were in development, you had huge transportation issues. Roads were clogged, you couldn't get development approved, and sort of figured out a gimmick, a way around that with the rules. Water is today's transportation, and there is no gimmick around the rules. So Madam Chairman, you showed us, I think you gave us a sense of what the future is with regard to this bottom-up movement. It will land at the dais of city and county commissions. And that's where probably a lot of this action is going to take place. And I think you outline what elected officials deal with when that information comes forward. So we really have to keep this movement going and build this database and this case for why it's critically important. Because I think facts matter. And I think when you review, when trying to make policy change, facts are really, really important. And the last thing, Todd, Toho is an amazing partner with Sunbridge. You guys have been just wonderful, and our collaboration is amazing with all the different universities and nonprofits, and Toho's been just great. You and your team have been wonderful in helping us move this whole movement forward. So with that, let's open it up. We just have a couple of minutes. We'll open it up for some questions from the audience.
Okay. Hey, thank you. So I'm currently doing sustainable landscaping for a lot of people, and so my clients are extremely passionate about the environment. And in the last year, in talking to them, I've referenced outside a lot as a resource because you know, really up until now, it's been difficult to find answers about a lot of this stuff. And the pushback that I get is, yeah, but hold on, aren't those like land developers? Like, you know, are they talking out of both sides of their mouth? Particularly things like the split oak controversy. You know, what's the balance of single family homes to multifamily stuff? Commissioner Lockhart, you kind of touched on that like tension between the public and the developer, and people being villainized or people being radical or whatever. I just think it's an interesting conversation that I'd appreciate all of your thoughts on, kind of touching on that criticism that no matter what you're saying in terms of landscape strategies or stormwater management or whatever, that land development is just sort of fundamentally unsustainable, and how do we blend that tension, particularly when it comes to a development that we're specifically focused on sustainability?
You know, I think one of the things we have to do is really truly, I know this sounds very basic, but building those relationships with people who are in that other camp, if you will. Because as soon as you get to know someone up close, it's very hard to misjudge them. And while you will find those areas of commonality, I find in talking with developers in particular, they will do what you require them to do. Like I was talking to a landscape architect earlier who said, well, the first thing I do is I look at what's the requirement, and I start from there. And so the requirement has to initially be reasonable, right? But then if we as a collective want to set a goal to increase, let's say it's plant material, whatever it may be, natives, over a period of time, maybe it's not a quick flip the switch type of a movement in that direction, but more of a, here's what it's going to be next year. And then in 2 years, it's going to be this. So that developers can plan, because frankly, they've got pro formas that they have to set out. There's more involved than just buying and building, right? So understanding their piece and really truly putting something together that is attainable with those ecological concepts in mind. And then I would also say to my native plant friends, and I do love you, I think I owe dues. I got an email saying my Native Plant Society dues are due. I'll send them. I will, I promise. I had a conversation with a gal the other day who wanted to work on some redoing some medians on a county road, and she was, low maintenance, no mow. And I said, great. You mean like perennial peanut? That, right? That's not a native. And I was like, okay, so like sunshine mimosa and what's the frog thing? Frog fruit. Because I realized I just got in big trouble. I was now persona non grata because I said that perennial peanut would be a good suggestion. So I think both sides need to come off of their stakes in the ground to a degree, so that we can meet somewhere in the middle of reasonableness. I don't know if that answers your question or not. I mean, I think relationships and talking to people and saying, "Hey, I've met one of those Republican elected officials, and she really wasn't as horrible as I thought she was going to be," right? It's just a thought.
On? Oh, hi, I have a quick question. We've seen the same chart multiple times today that shows the progression of water use as we've installed more irrigation systems. And I feel like that's a big piece that's been missing in this conversation is where do we start the conversation about how to not install irrigation or have improved irrigation systems? Because that to me is a big piece that is needing to be discussed.
Let me, as the resident developer, but yeah, where's my black hat? The living laboratory at Sunbridge, that's exactly our objective. It's why we're doing it. We knew we have limited water supplies, and really, selfishly, in our business interests, have a sustainable, the two-word use of the words, not environmentally sustainable, economically sustainable business at Sunbridge, we knew we had to do something different. And our whole objective with these alternative landscapes is to, I think you heard Todd talk about Toho's goals and getting irrigation water down, and I think Pierce Jones would tell you we're on a trend where we're reducing irrigation consumption, and our goal is to wean ourselves off of it. Mike and Todd talked about millions and millions and millions of dollars in capital projects to fix the problems of the past. But going forward, if we can avoid the nutrients in the water and we can avoid water consumption, we can, for the next generations, maybe there won't be that massive capital need to go back and fix things. So that's our whole goal, is to wean ourselves off of irrigation.
I'd like to just add to that real quick too. One thing is, that's our goal of when we're managing by this supplemental is exactly that, trying to, because back to some of what the chair said, is still to allow people some flexibility to make their environment fit them. And so just a single recipe doesn't work for everybody. And so driving that expectation down, but then giving some of that latitude is really important. And the cost benefit, we want to talk to developers. Let's talk about money. How many of you think that you could conserve 10%? Not a big number, right? My utility uses somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 million gallons a day. 10% is 5 million gallons a day. A new plant costs me $25 a gallon. That is $125 million capital savings if every one of my customers save 10%. It's huge. Now let's talk to developers about it. That saves impact fees and costs of development. So a lot of this is about us just talking. I heard the comment earlier, we all want the same thing. We got to put all of our conversations into the language that resonates with each group so that we can find that common ground, because I really don't think it's that far apart.
Oh. I think we have one in the back of the room. Let's go there first. We'll come right here, okay?
Thank you. Good afternoon. My question is for the Water Authority and for the district, but certainly open to the whole panel. And the question is, as we're noticing that native landscapes are becoming more prevalent, okay, people are also enjoying ecotourism on the waterways. How do the districts deal with or manage the use of vendors coming through? Maybe it's an established vendor that's actually at the foothold of a lake or a waterway, or it's a more nomadic or non-established entity that just comes in and does these tours. How do you manage for any potential disarray that's happening in the area? That's also, we haven't talked about aquatic, aside from the wetlands, obviously. But how do we protect? Do we tax someone who's using that space for, to make their living? Or how do we mitigate? Who's responsible for taking care of those areas?
Well, I fortunately we haven't had to really address that issue that a lot of parks and across the nation, especially as TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and all that publicize all the hidden spots out there that are so wonderful. It has happened some here in Florida too, but to where they're loved to death. But that's an issue that um, is going to be something that we will have to address as we um, balance that with us promoting the use of our properties and promoting the ecotourism and wanting people to enjoy and get a better appreciation for the natural resources that are out there. Because the more that you can have people in touch with that, the more that they recognize the importance and the value of it, the more likely you are to be able to successfully implement policies and ordinances and rules and regulations that will provide that protection. The question of how you handle vendors, we haven't really had to deal with that too much. They've been off property and they just come on and use it and come back off, but we haven't had to set up any kind of relationships with those. I think South Florida's had a little bit of a different thing. Maybe they can get him up here next year. We'll get Drew up here and get him to answer some of those questions. But right now we're in the process of doing the opposite, to where we're trying to educate people more about the opportunities that are available with our public lands that we have at the district, so that we can increase the love of those lands and make it much easier for us to protect them.
We have a question up front here.
So one overarching theme is conserving because we know that we're constrained. And up in North Florida, I feel like there isn't that sense. So we don't have this motivation because we keep increasing allocations and keep giving out consumptive use permits. So how do we get ahead of it so we don't have to, wait to get over allocated and then start getting the motivation in our local developers and builders to do things like this?
So
That's yours.
I can
All
try.
yours.
I'm doing the so that my mic comes on, and then I can talk about it. So I don't know where exactly North Florida you're talking about, if it's like the Jacksonville, Northeast Florida area, Alachua County. So one thing is you hear a lot about allocations being handed out and new uses coming online, but we just did a thing within Central Florida Water Initiative area where we took a look back and showed that allocations had actually reduced over time, and a lot of that is through conservation. A lot of that is through the increased use of reclaimed water and things like that. But I can tell you that they are feeling it in North Florida, and the water supply plan that we're working on up there is showing deficits that need to be reclaimed, and the minimum flows and levels within the Swanee River Water Management District and within the St. Johns River Water Management District, where we had Lakes Brooklyn and Geneva, Lake Cowpen. That's one of the reasons for that Black Creek Water Resource Development Project. That's a $100 million project that's going to put 10 million gallons a day, up to 10 million gallons a day back into the aquifer and help take care of the minimum flows and levels within our district. That the St. John's portion of the district is fortunate in that there's a barrier between the Floridan aquifer and the wetlands that are on the surface. When you start moving towards Swanee, you hit the springs, which are a direct connection to it, and then you hit those that don't have that barrier, and so they have a more direct connection to the surface water. So those are more likely to be impacted. So we're in the process right now. We just had recent public meetings, which I'm sure you're aware of, where we're coming up with projects, including significant conservation measures that we're working with Swanee River and DEP to figure out where we're going. And we're looking at CFWI as kind of being one of the starting points where we set a fairly aggressive per capita usage for people to get down to. And so I would say that we are very aware that there are issues within the North Florida region, and we're working really hard to take care of those.
We've hit our limit of time, and I want to thank Todd, Mike, and Amy for your contribution today, folks. This is ultimately, this public policy forum is where I think this whole movement is headed to create some change. So thank you, and would you join me in thanking our panel today? Appreciate it.